Well, as you can see, we are not in Kansas anymore, or Missouri, or anywhere near the Midwest. This week, we are in St. Augustine, Florida, visiting the Castillo de San Marcos, and this fort was built by the Spanish in 1672 to protect the Gulf Stream shipping channel, and it was inhabited by the Spanish, the British, and the Americans. And St. Augustine itself was established in 1565. That's 42 years before Jamestown in 1607. And I have been chomping at the bit to get inside this fort ever since I decided to come down here. And if you're new here, I'm Julian, and I visit historical sites to see what they can teach us. And all information in this video was learned during my visit. And I'm down in St. Augustine with my daughter and her fiance and my grandson. And here he is right now running around the area of the fort called the Covert Way. And this area allowed troops to assemble and fire without being in the way of the enemy's fire. And you can also see the moat in the distance. But this was a dry moat. There was never meant to be any water in it. Construction on this fort was begun in 1672 and it ended in 1695, and it replaced a series of wooden forts that had protected St. Augustine for the past 100 years. The entrance to the fort was very elaborate. There were two drawbridges. This is the outer drawbridge, and then this is what they call the Sally Port and the second drawbridge. It's 1,800 pounds, and it took 3 soldiers 15 minutes to close with a hand crank. And while the first drawbridge was closed each night, the main drawbridge was left open unless they were engaged in combat. And throughout the fort, we found these Spanish crests, and this is a simple version of the Spanish coat of arms. Castles and lions symbolize the kingdoms of Castile and Leon, and the sheep represents the Order of the Golden Fleece, the highest ranking chivalric order given by the Spanish crown, and these were placed here in 1756. And the door in front of us, that is the portcullis, and that was an added defense, and that took 2 soldiers to move that into place. And this is the only way in and out of this fort, and these walls are 14 feet thick. So we're going to turn to the right and head into the guard room and check out the size of that portcullis. It is huge. All right, so no Spanish soldiers lived inside the fort. They lived in town, and they would only come to the fort for drills and to perform guard duty, and that usually lasted about 24 hours. And this platform is for the soldiers to grab a nap. And if you remember when we were at Fort Scott back in Kansas, there was a platform just like this for the soldiers to rest. Interesting. And the soldiers would also prepare their meals in these rooms and play games to pass the time. And many soldiers had families, and that's why they lived in town. They also would have more than likely had to have had a second job other than soldiering. When I first walked into this room, I was quite perplexed. I didn't know what I was looking at. It is a massive vaulted room. As a matter of fact, all the rooms in this fort here are vaulted and conical shaped, and they kind of look just like this room. But this room holds a secret or two.
I don't know if you can see that. That's graffiti. Did you see that?
Yeah.
They've written graffiti on the walls. Mm-hmm. Look, over here too.
It's on their ship. It's the blueprints of their ship.
Oh, it's the blueprints of their ship. Wow, look, you can really see it. Look, right there. See it? Yeah, it's all over the place, but mostly like right there. See it?
The checkered patterns on the side of this ship look just like British ships around 1800 because they had stripes that looked like a checkerboard when their gun ports were opened.
Here, it's looking like there's no J in the alphabet back then. And look, their
It's
B
the
and P
alphabet.
is different. It's
A, B, B is backwards.
B is backwards. And then the G look weird. H, I, K, L, M.
O.
Yeah.
P, O, D.
R, S, T, U, V, W, X,
Maybe
Y.
somebody was learning their alphabet.
Yeah, maybe they learned.
Someone has carved a message on the wall, and although they can tell that the text is Old Spanish, the message itself makes no sense. Too many letters have been worn off for them to translate it accurately.
Look here, what's this? It's the prison.
No, thank you.
Let's see, because we have issues on this channel with doing this through screens. Wow, look at that. That looks really damp and cold.
Yeah, damn. Cellar vibes.
In the beginning, I told you that the Spanish built this fort to protect the shipping route of the Gulf Stream, but it was also to hold off the British who wanted to colonize North America. As early as 1586, Sir Francis Drake and his forces attacked and burned the city of St Augustine, and the city held out during 2 British sieges. In 1702, 1,500 people from St Augustine crammed into this fort for 51 days, and in 1740, the governor of the British colony of Georgia, General James Oglethorpe, held the city for 28 days. Neither times did the fort fall, but both times the city of St. Augustine was burned. And here again is another Spanish crest on this cannon.
What'd you find?
Go in there.
I think you can, yeah.
This is the trash. This is where they dumped the trash.
Oh.
It was the powder room, but it said it was too wet.
What we have found here is the powder magazine, and this is where they would have stored the gunpowder. And the Spanish thought this room was ideal for it because it is deep underneath the earth where it's safe from enemy fire. However, they soon realized that this room was too damp and the gunpowder ended up being ruined, so they turned this into a trash dump.
That was pretty funny getting through that.
Anything and everything was thrown down here, including human leg bones that had been amputated, and the room was eventually sealed up and forgotten until the 1830s when the U.S. Army was occupying this fort. And because of the human bones that they recovered, rumors began that this was actually a dungeon and that people had been chained to the walls and left to die.
Oh, look, what's this?
No.
This is where they would store all of the money.
Ooh,
This is the
safe.
coffer, the treasury room. Wow, I wonder how much they had in here. Oh, look, somebody's been digging for treasure.
Who? Who done
Somebody's been digging for treasure. Another vaulted room. They're all vaulted. Oh, look, when this one's got a little, was this the chapel? Uh-huh, I bet this was. It looks, yep, Look.
And this room is most definitely the chapel, and it was used by both the Catholic Spanish and the Protestant British, and this is what they believed it would have looked like when the Spanish were here, and that is a font for holy water. After Spain's defeat in the 7 Years' War in 1763, a treaty was signed and the territory of Florida was handed over to the British. They renamed the fort St. Mark, and Florida became a haven for royalists during the American Revolution, and this fort housed hundreds of British troops. After the war, Florida was returned to Spain by the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution, and this room is set up to demonstrate a soldier's bunk during the British era. This is Matanzas Bay, and it provided even more protection for St. Augustine, which is 456 years old. That is amazing. This is the oldest town in North America. This is a great view of the entrance and the moat, and like I said in the beginning, this was a dry moat and it was part of the defenses of the fort. If an enemy soldier got into that moat, there was nothing to protect him, and during the British sieges, the townspeople housed their livestock down there. This is the main watchtower, and we were just in another one of the other watchtowers, but it was much smaller. There are actually 4 towers here, and this one originally had a platform for a lookout, and there was a bell up there that was rung to warn the town of attack or danger, and these towers were manned 24/7, and this is incredibly cool. So we are now down below in the East Moat, and in 1821 the United States purchased Florida from Spain for $5 million, and Florida became a territory of the United States, and they renamed this fort Fort Marion. The Americans also thickened the seawall and filled in this area of the moat to allow for additional cannons, and this fort was used by the Confederate forces during the American Civil War. This is a furnace where they prepared hot shots, and hot shots were superheated cannonballs, and they were meant to be fired onto the enemy ships and catch them on fire. And a soldier would load the cannonballs up here at the top, and they would roll over, fire, and heat up to about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it took about 30 minutes. Then 2 soldiers would carry the hot cannonballs over to a nearby cannon. The fort became a national monument in 1924 and was transferred to the National Park Service in 1933, and more damage has been done by tourists than all prior habitation. And here's an interesting fact. In 1895, Florida's first golf course was here on the fort grounds, and Florida has 1,270 golf courses as of today. And there is so much more to see down here, so I hope that you all will join me next week for another Florida adventure.